Hey guys, this is Jan for Chess24. Today I'm going to be taking a look at the game Hikaru Nakamura, the US number 1, against Michael Adams, the English number 1. This game was played in round 4 of the London Chess Classic. And while neither of the players were in the lead, in fact Nakamura was on -1 before the game and Adams was on 50%, it was simply the most exciting game of the round. And that's why we're gonna jump straight into it and see what happens. Round 4, interestingly, saw all 3 games start with 1d4, including this one, and the games were a bit more lively than the 3-1e4 games we've seen in round 3. We're blaming the Berlin Wall, of course, but there are plenty solid openings against 1d4 as well, and Adams chose one of them, the Queen's Gambit declined. Now here it already gets slightly interesting for theory nerds like yours truly. The main move here is knight c3, when Adams typically chooses the move bishop to e7, the traditional Queen's Gambit move, but Nakamura chooses not to play that move, but the move bishop g5. Now this move has been seen quite a bit as well, but it's normally employed if White wants to avoid certain lines after knight c3, most typically the move c5, the semi-Tarrasch with c takes d, knight takes d5, or the semi-Slav. In both of those, White has some extra options after bishop g5, especially c5, cd5. Of course, there is no knight takes d5 anymore. So it's a bit puzzling to me why you would choose this line against Mickey Adams, who is likely to go bishop e7 anyway. And he does happily play bishop e7 here. However, it's very possible Hikaru was just looking for a fresh position, which he achieves by playing the move queen c2. By no means a bad move, defends this pawn, and it's the square the queen would normally end up anyway. However, it gets us a bit off the beaten track, which could easily be re-entered with knight c3 or e3 here, of course. So queen c2, h6, which is fine, so is castles. But h6 asks the bishop to commit immediately. Nakamura gives it up on f6. It's a very typical decision in all these Queen's Gambit declined lines. Do you go bishop h4 or do you take on f6? Especially before black is ready to take back with the knight. Nakamura decides to give his bishop up here, which of course is heartbreak for bishop pair fetishists like myself. However, White wins some useful time in return, which he can spent on the fight for the center, so I do get the idea. e3, surprisingly, in my database is only one game with this position, which looks reasonably standard, so Nakamura certainly managed to take Adams into unknown territory. And Adams seems happy to stay in that unknown territory, plays the novelty c5 here, which I'm not very fond of, and we'll see soon why. The normal move was castles, when after knight c3 the game could have transposed to what is a pretty typical Queen's Gambit declined line. I'll show you the normal move order to get there. Knight c3, bishop e7, bishop g5, h6, takes, e3, castles, and queen c2 leads us to this same position, which is considered to be alright for black after c5 as far as I know, but of course it is a playable line for white. Instead, Adams goes c5 immediately, making the game a lot more concrete. His point could have been that if white goes dc5 now, queen a5 check looks like an easy equalizer. Knight c3 and let's say d takes c4, black is totally fine. However, c5 before having castles allows the move c takes d5, which is what happens in the game. Now the only good move black has is the one he plays, c takes d4, e takes d5 just runs into queen takes c5, or even worse, bishop b5 followed by queen c5, while the move queen takes d5 runs into knight to c3 when black just loses too much time. So he has to go c takes d4. Here we see the drawback of having played c5 so early. White goes bishop b5 check. Knight takes d4 would have been fine after e takes d5. But bishop b5 check is quite annoying because it's based on a very cute little trick I haven't seen in that form. Adams plays the natural bishop to d7, and here Nakamura, who was still familiar with this position, went for the move d takes e6, which looks like it's losing a piece at first sight, but it's not, and the trick is after bishop b5, e takes f7. No matter where the black king goes, he ends up in a double attack against his bishop and himself. King takes f7, runs into queen b3 check, while king f8 or king e7 both run into queen c5, and the bishop is gone. So d takes e6, very nice little trick, and f takes e6 does not really solve black's problems either, because queen g6 check is very strong. So Adams had to start getting creative, and he does with the move queen a5 check, which still looks like the bishop might be in some trouble, but the tactics work out here for white after knight bd2, and we'll briefly go through them. The most natural move is still bishop takes b5, but here there is a different problem. Queen c8 check is now possible with the queen on a5. Queen d8 looks like the most logical reply in order not to lose his rook on h8. After queen d8, however, there is queen takes b7, which not only attacks the bishop and the rook, those could cover themselves with bishop c6, but also attacks the f7 pawn, threatening checkmate, which is one attack too many. Black would have to castle, and then after queen takes b5, white is just much better. One very funny line was after bishop b5, queen c8 check, the move king to e7, when white has to take on h8, and is probably better, but this could actually be ground for research after d takes e3, f takes e3, f takes e6. If black manages to build some counterplay here with the white king in the center, it is a bit hard to believe. One fantasy line was knight to d7, queen takes a8, knight to c5, as played a century or two ago, sacrificing all the rooks, but it doesn't work in the cold eyes of the modern computer, who just says queen c8 and plus 5 or something. Knight d3, king f1, knight f4, knight c4, game over. So this didn't work, and Adams had to try another move, which he did. He went queen takes b5. And actually things aren't too bad. I don't think this is what he was dreaming of, but the game is far from over or far from obviously bad for black, because after knight takes d7, knight d4, bishop d4, e d4 were actually fine for black, even though he's a pawn down. After castles, he profits from the fact the white king is now stuck in the center. Can't really go anywhere good, and here black would be more than fine. The problem for black is the move queen e4 check, which of course happened in the game. Only good move is king f8, and you never like playing a move like king f8, because now it's the black forces that don't coordinate very well without castle. Knight takes d4. Winning a pawn for the moment, however, the material balance is instantly restored with queen takes b2. The positional balance is disturbed now because the black king is on f8. Rook to b1, queen takes a2, and queen takes b7. And we see both sides' pieces are loose. But in all the upcoming complications, white always has the option of castling away, which black doesn't have. So queen b7 is based on a very cute key tactic, which we should get out of the way first. Black goes rook to b8 here. White goes queen takes d7. Rook takes b1, knight takes b1, queen takes b1, and king to e2. When queen takes h1, looks like it's winning a rook, but it does have the problem that you're getting checkmated. Very cute mate, queen c8 check, king e7, and knight f5 checkmate. Not a construction you see every day, which very economically the black king is deprived of any square with it, only two white pieces. So it's a very pretty mate, which of course both players had seen. Nakamura was arguing, and I think he's right, that black should still have gone for this and played queen b2 check here, king to f3, g6, when it looks like black has pretty decent drawing chances in, for example, this rook ending, which I guess is a theoretical draw. However, there is some practical winning chances, and probably Adams felt it's not that bad that you have to go for this. Instead, after queen b7, he went for the move rook to d8, which required a lot of calculation. At first it looks like knight c6 is good for white, attacking this rook, which would have to, if it had to move, the knight on d7 would have been en prise. However, after knight c6, there is the move knight c5. Looks pretty strong, attacking this knight and attacking the queen. And white still has the move queen to b4, defending d2 and pinning this knight. So pretty nice multi-purpose move. But the fun isn't over. Black goes king to g8, gets out of the pin, threatening knight to d3 check. So you can't take the rook. If white now castles, there is the move knight to a6. Very pretty move. The knight gets out of the way with tempo. And next move, black is ready to capture the piece on d2. Pretty complicated tactics, which both players did see and evaluate correctly. That black is alright here. So after rook d8, Nakamura did not go for knight c6, but instead went for queen b4 check, stopping knight c5. King to g8. And now he castled, and we see the key difference in the position. White's rooks get into the game much more easily, and this means that most likely black will lose at least his a-pawn while he's coordinating, and he's going to have to fight for a draw. Next couple of moves are pretty logical. a5, the a-pawn doesn't go down without a fight. Queen c3. Now rook a1 is a threat, so queen d5 to stop that. But white uses his initiative to keep probing. Queen to c7, threatening rook b5 amongst other things now. Knight to f8 back. Knight is the best friend of the king, they say, but it's not the best friend of his a-pawn here. In this position, I'm not sure. You could argue about the next move, rook b5, knight to f3, just stabilizing this very strong knight on d4. Threatening rook b5 was pretty good as well. But Nakamura decided to go for the ending after rook b5, queen d7. He took on d7. He taken on a5, then the bishop d4, ed, queen d4. White is still better, but the material might be a little too limited to play for a win here after, or to get the win. You can certainly still play for one after knight f3, queen d6. But he decided to avoid that, and I think correctly judged that he has bigger winning chances in the ending after queen d7, rook d7. Once again, because this a-pawn is a goner. Knight f3, for starters, you have to defend the d4 square. And I believe Adams chose correctly here that with limited material, his drawing chances increase. He could, of course, choose something like, I don't know, g6, rook takes a5, king g7, and try to hold such a position. But I believe this is a very thankless task. With 4 against 3, the two knights are very strong, the white pieces are very well coordinated. And I believe Adams chose correctly, trying to get rid of material. Bishop d4, knight d4, and knight to e6. Knight takes e6, f takes e6, rook takes a5. This is the rook ending that would define the final stage of the game. It's very hard to say if it's objectively drawn or objectively winning. I'm also not qualified to give an opinion here. I would not be surprised by either assessment. And my hunch is actually that it's objectively winning, just like the other lines we've seen earlier, which is why I still think Adams made the correct decision. But with the pawn on e6, defense is probably very tough for black here. It's not a normal 4 against 3 because you have this isolated pawn. There's a classical game by Anatoly Karpov, the former world champion, against Vlastimil Hort, I believe played in the early 80s, where Karpov managed to win this position, which has the same structure on the king side, more or less, but Hort had an extra a-pawn, so it was 4 against 4, and Karpov still won this one, which, of course, spells bad news for Adams in the 4 against 3 situation we have here. King to f7 to get the rook out, and g4. Remember that move g4, whenever you have a 4 against 3 situation, a rook ending, or any ending, tends to be a good idea to go g4, grab some extra space, stop black from playing h5. Not sure you want to play h5 here, but this g4 is a move you always want to play. Rook c8, Another discussion here is if black should have tried to exchange a pair of rooks, rook d8, let's say king g2, rook d1, and if this ending with only one pair of rooks is winning for white. Once again, I'm not fully qualified. We remember this Karpov ending, which Karpov won in a similar situation with an added black a-pawn. I'm not sure. Nakamura said in the post-mortem that he was intending to keep all four rooks on the board and play the move rook to a1 back, which in principle, to attack the black weaknesses and overstretch the defenses, probably makes sense to have all four rooks. However, it's a bit more passive, of course, the move rook a1 than progressing. Now, it seems like Adams also was under the impression that the pure rook ending was lost, and he doesn't make an effort to exchange rooks here or in the next moves. Rook c8, rook b1, rook c2 looks active, but doesn't do all that much, and I still believe that black should have tried to go rook c7, rook c5 or rook c1, exchange one pair of rooks. Rook c2, rook a8, turns out that rook d2 does not really work because white goes rook b7, and after king f6, let's say, king f6, rook f8 check, he always manages to find a way to cover this f2 pawn very easily, king g6. There's probably also rook g8 winning. So black is not really in a position to get active. Instead, he tried rook c4, h3. Here, Adams, I'm not sure if it was desperation. I believe it was a calculation mistake mainly. Went for the move h5. Good idea in theory, trying to exchange some material. He wants to exchange his h-pawn for one of the ensuing white h-pawns, which is the g-pawn now. But it doesn't work. Instead, he should have tried, once again, move like rook dc7 and somehow tried to exchange a pair of rooks and survive that rook ending with might have been possible, might not have been possible, but was certainly the best chance. Here h5 runs into very complicated but nice tactical refutation. So this once again teaches us that even in so-called dry endings, one has to be on the lookout for tactics. And here's one which I believe Adams missed. Rook h8, very strong move, defending this pawn. And if Adams were to take the other pawn, rook takes h3, his rook ends up in trouble. King g2, rook h4, and the move f4. Locking the rook out of the game, rook g4 doesn't work because king h3 picks it up. And if you try to help this guy with rook d5, planning to take the h5 pawn, there is a mating construction all of a sudden. Rook b7 check, king to f6, and rook f8 is checkmate. So that would have been a very cute idea, or at least if you're sitting on the white side, it is a very cute idea. I'm a bit surprised Adams missed it because, one second, I have to set this up, because in his game against Caruana, there was a very, very similar tactic in the very same tournament. Let's see if we can bring that up. Yeah, here we go. This is from the first round, the game Adams won against Fabiano Caruana. One key line was the move queen to f8, rook takes g7, queen takes, king takes, and here the move g4. Which looks a bit familiar, doesn't it? Like, once again, we have the sidelined trapped black rook on h4. Here Adams was on the winning side of this idea, which didn't appear on the board, but it was an important line. Same here. Today, this doesn't appear on the board, but it is a key line, and Adams is not on the lucky end of this one. So instead, after rook h8, by now, of course, he spotted what happened. He tried king f6, but this is already agony. Now black is 2 pawns down, and Nakamura plays a very precise king h2. It's much better than king g2, because in a key line later, he can use the g file for his rook. King h2, rook to d5, still trying to win his pawn back, but to no avail. Rook f8 check, king e7, rook f3. Now black has a problem. If he takes this pawn, he loses his g-pawn. Rook b7 check, rook d7 takes, king takes, and rook f7. So this didn't work, and nothing really works for black anymore. He tries the last chance, rook to f5. But rook takes, e takes. Here we see that Nakamura had calculated this very well in advance. Now he has rook g1, and he can use this g file to activate his rook before black is in time to take his pawn. King f6, rook g6 check, king f7, and rook g5. Once again, not allowing anything. Adams decided to end his suffering here, played the move king f6, when once again we have the familiar construction by now of f4, and this rook is trapped, will be picked up next move with king g3. So Adams resigned. So if king f6, he could have fought on for some moves with f4, but being 2 pawns down, it is pretty hopeless. For example, rook f5, king e6, rook takes f4. And this rook ending with 2 pawns up is, of course, easily winning. So a good win for Hikaru Nakamura, who moves to 50%, or with the way they're counting in the London Chess Classic, the 3-point system, he moves to 5 out of 12. Let's see if we can bring that up. Yeah, here we got the standings after round 4 of 5. Kramnik and Giri in the lead, playing each other tomorrow, Giri with white. We can remember Kramnik beat Giri in Qatar. Nakamura, he's playing black against Caruana. He also has a chance to win the tournament, even outright. If Kramnik and Giri were to draw, Nakamura were to win, he would win this tournament. So a lot of scenarios possible in the last round. I'll be watching. I want to thank you guys for watching this video, and I'm sure I'll see you soon. Bye-bye, everybody.